Hey guys, my guest today, Nigel Watson, is going to be talking about the history and influence of well-known alien encounters and abduction cases. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing? Wow, one step closer to Friday. It's only Tuesday, though. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. Our guest isn't in the green room yet. He's in the UK, so he might be behind schedule, or maybe he got the times kind of messed up because we were trying to coordinate on times. And so if he doesn't come in today, I'll just read from Lynn Monet's book, and we'll just do that for the hour. But anyway, again, my name is Charlotte. I'm the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal need, we can get to you. It may take us a while. California is a huge state. We've got deserts, we've got mountains, we've got a lot of farmland, so it takes a while to get from point A to point B sometimes. But we will get to you, all right? I have sensitives on staff who can call you and consult with you on whatever may or may not be going on. And whatever may or may not be going on with your problems in your home, okay? And then she'll do that, and we'll get right out there within 1 or 2 days, okay? So it's not like we're not going to get out there at all for a week. We will get out there within 1 or 2 days. Anyway, if you're watching from Facebook today, please be sure to hit that follow button if you haven't done so already. Also, if you give me, if you like what you hear today, give me some thumbs up, happy faces, and all that. Because what it does is it puts us higher in the FYP. Facebook sees that, and it moves us up higher to distribute to more people. Okay. Same thing with YouTube. If you visit our YouTube page or you're watching from YouTube, give me a thumbs up, because that's the same thing. Okay. You want to be up in that. You want to be rising through the FYP to get more exposure, and that's what does it. Also, comments. If you guys have comments during the show, feel free to comment. That's what we're here for. It's in the back. Come join the conversation. That's what it's for. Again, that helps us move through the computerized FYP and all that stuff. Okay? So, thank you. Thank you if you do it. All right? So, we are broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch today. And I welcome everybody that comes to see the show. It's going to be a great show. Oh my gosh, it's going to be a great show. But I want to make a couple announcements. I am next Tuesday is the full moon. It's a sturgeon moon in August, and I've decided to do a sturgeon moon meditation. And with that sturgeon moon meditation, you will be able to take off any worries that you have. Just things like that. Any health issues that you might have, you might be able to, ask about that. Things like that during the meditation. It's a great time to meditate. And so I'm offering a meditation, and that's going to be next Tuesday at 7:40 p.m. Pacific, and it's a guided meditation. So if you want to relax for the day and have a good night's sleep or whatever, come on in and meditate, and we'll get you set up with that. I'll show you how to do that type of meditation. It's also going to lead into something that I want to try, in that I want to start doing monthly or weekly meditations. To where I was thinking about going every day, but I don't know if I'm going to do that. But at least maybe bi-weekly we can do meditations, and it'll be like a club, and we'll work on certain things for each meditation. Like we might be working on we might work on your health. We might work on maybe something's going on in your life that's upsetting you. We can work on that through meditation. So, excuse me, allergies. So I'm seriously thinking about doing that. Okay, but in the meantime, next week, August 1st, 7:40 p.m. Pacific, we're going to do a full moon meditation. Okay, so it's going to be a sturgeon moon full moon meditation, and because the moon holds a lot of energy for people, and it's a really cool time to meditate. All right. Also, I'm teaching a psychic development class. It's Psychic Development Class 1, where it's a basic class that teaches you how to open and close the psychic door so that negative stuff doesn't come in. Because a lot of people who try out their abilities for the first time, they'll open that door, but they won't close it. And the next thing you know, there's all kinds of stuff coming in. All right. It's not all going to be happy, happy, happy. It's going to be some negativity. So what my class teaches is I teach you how to open and close that door. I teach you how to meditate. I teach you how to leave your body and go elsewhere and come back in. We go to the spirit library. We go to your spirit object. We go to the spirit animal, and you get to meet all of them, including your spirit guides. So if you're interested in that class, come on down and sign up. That's at the California Haunts Meetup page. I have links to both those events down at the bottom of the description for this show. So if you go to that description, you'll see the links. It doesn't cost anything to sign up for the meetup group itself. So, there you have it. Okay, again, YouTube. If you're watching from YouTube, be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And take a look around the YouTube. YouTube's got more than 681 videos over there, all different topics. And what I've done is I've taken those videos and I put them into different category folders. So it's a lot easier to find. Otherwise, when you go in there and look at the front page of the YouTube, you suddenly realize that it's mind-boggling. It's mind-numbing. It's mind-numbing for me. So that's why I decided to take things and start putting them in categories. If you're into what we're going to be discussing today, there's a file for that. If you're into medium Nancy Matz on Friday, she's got her own file. You can just go in there and check those out. So everything's under file. Ancient history, etc., etc. And I think it makes it a lot easier for you guys. Okay. All right. So I just made the announcement. We're on Facebook under California Haunts. We're on YouTube under California Haunts Radio. We're under California Haunts on Twitter. I believe we're under Cal Haunts on Twitch. We're under California Haunts at TikTok. And I also have a page on Instagram under Ghosty Gal. It's all lowercase. So you can find us everywhere. If you think you have a question about this kind of stuff, or a comment, or you think you might have something going on in your home or place of business, that's how you get a hold of us. You can go on all those pages. There's all kinds of ways to get a hold of us. Okay. Again, my allergies are really bad today, but I'm really excited about our guest today. Nigel Watson. We're going to be talking about UFO abductions and things like that here in the U.S. And I think we're going to be talking about some famous cases as well. So I'm real excited to talk with him. He is in the green room right now. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him out. Here we go. Let's hope for the best. He's over in the UK. You never know.
Right. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. So just interested in being able to be on your program and talk about alien abductions.
Fantastic. How is the weather in the UK today?
It's quite sunny at the moment, but cool, and it's sort of raining sometimes as well. So it's not very warm, and it's not really very summery either. So and all the children have gone on school holidays now, so we're going to get a very damp school holiday at the moment. Yeah.
Well, that's something that I remember of visiting England in the month of August, is that it'll rain like the dickens, and then boom, it's all sunny. So it's kind of like a cool thing,
Yeah, you can never tell. It's very variable, so,
Tell me about you, sir. What got you into this topic and all that good stuff?
Well, how I got interested in the subject is something that it's a subject that struck me quite a long time ago when we had the moon landings in 1969. I got really interested in the subject, and I'd cut out everything I saw in the newspapers about any of the Apollo missions, and newspapers, and I'd watch all the news programs and anything about space travel, really. And that kind of got me drifting into a bit of astronomy. And then at the library, we had a lot of UFO books as well, particularly books by George Adamski and some of the other contactees said they'd actually met aliens back in the 1950s. So, they were way ahead of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, So those stories fascinated me because obviously everybody was interested in space exploration and divers talk about extraterrestrial life, and Eric von Daniken had his book out, Chariots of the Gods,
Right.
which was so serialized in our national newspapers. So I obviously cut all those stories out as well. So it was kind of like a mixture of things, really. Things about space and astronomy and UFOs become a kind of natural progression. But I also read, more serious UFO books by the likes of Donald Keyhole and the more people who are more specifically interested in actual UFO sightings as extraterrestrial craft, and they tended to shy away from contactees, really, because they thought they were too outlandish and silly.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to be scientific and get proof. So I kind of went in the sort of scientific direction, really, and I started doing my own investigations and setting up a UFO group. I lived in northern England, somewhere called Scunthorpe, and we set up a group in the early 70s. And I only knew one or two people interested in the subject. So when we first had a meeting, I was quite surprised to see about 30 people turn up. So the group got a good start, and we kept going for several years, really, and we get guest speakers. But we were quite open about the different aspects of the subject. We didn't just look at UFO cases, we looked at other things like meditation and I suppose the spiritual implications of alien contact, because a lot of people had lots of other interests. And so we kept the group going for quite a few years. And we also went on a trip to Warminster and Glastonbury, places down south, because particularly Warminster in the sort of 60s was a massive UFO window area. And there's lots of sightings there, lots of excitement and publicity. But we kind of went there in the early 70s when it kind of drifted away from the excitement of it all. So we were a bit Johnny come latelys, really. But it's quite interesting actually visiting somewhere that's been a UFO hotspot. So so from there, I carried on doing my own investigations, really, and met quite a few fascinating people. But I think it's one of these subjects where you think you're getting somewhere with it, and then it'll throw a loop on you, and then there's more new information or something changes and there's different ideas. Because I think when I first became interested, it seemed obvious these were spaceships, probably would come for, hundreds, if not thousands of years. So that seemed logical. But getting the evidence of that is another thing entirely. And, that's where even your own local investigations, you can only go so far, and especially with lights in the sky, even if it is something esoteric or different, it's hard to pin that down because there's so many other things going on in the sky. And I think that's a problem with the current UAP interest, in that although they've rebranded UFOs as unidentified anomalous phenomena, a lot of them are still, lights in the sky. And I think the problem with that is, although some people think they're showing, really strange characteristics, it depends on witness testimony, really, and there's not that much physical evidence to suggest, they are sort of alien ships of any kind. So it is hard pinning down the evidence, really, and I think that's what the latest Pentagon hearings are going to be about, whether there is any physical evidence, who's got it, and what have they done with it. So it's a bit of a minefield tracking down information, really. And like I was saying, just a light in the sky can take an investigator, because you need to look for other witnesses, what was on, what was in the sky at the time in terms of astronomy, local airfields, balloons, that sort of thing. It's not easy.
Absolutely. When you look at these abductions, do you see a common thread in them at all?
Well, I think with the abduction cases, they open up a new channel of investigations, really. And I suppose because I was interested in the subject in the early 70s, it was still quite a new field of study, really. And the most outstanding one was, the Betty and Barney Hill case, because John Fuller had published the Interrupted Journey book, and that's a sort of classic book about abductions, and not just that, sorry, not just the Betty and Barney Hill, but just putting the subject in the arena, making it worthy of study, really, because there've been lots of stories of abductions, but they were mainly sorry,
It's okay.
mainly rumors or stories from South America. So the Betty and Barney Hill case, because it occurred in the United States, was easier to get information about, really, and it was quite thoroughly investigated. So, and I think even the American investigators at first were a bit wary of it. It took journalists like John Fuller to actually write a book about it. I think the American organizations like APRO and NICAP were rather conservative about such cases. And I think they were quite frightened to even mention abductions. I think the floodgates opened with the Anthony Villas-Boas case, which was a case of a man being abducted in 1957 in Brazil, and that seemed to make people look for other abductions. And then the Betty and Barney Hill case came along, because it was able to be studied by an American investigator or other investigators, and that we had access to the Betty and Barney Hill as well. It just became something that made a big splash, really, in the media when it all became public. And in a way, my book, Captured by Aliens, kind of looks at the Betty and Barney Hill case in the context of the South American cases and other abduction cases that were kind of going on around that period. But, theirs was far more complex, really. And I think another aspect of their case is the fact it had missing time and the hypnosis, which were factors that hadn't been elements of abduction cases or any UFO case, really, up to that period. And through hypnosis, they found out a lot more about what might have gone on during the missing time after they'd seen a UFO. In Britain, though, we're not so keen on having hypnotic regression or hypnosis, and it's actually sort of banned by the British UFO Research Association, because I think, it can muddle the subject, really. But with the Betty and Barney Hill case, because it was almost unique at that time. And because Barney had suffered a lot of stress and trauma, hypnosis was actually used by a sort of professional medical person rather than in the years since. A lot of amateurs have been involved with hypnotizing people, which is a bit frightening, really. So I think with the Betty Barney Hill case, with them having Dr. Benjamin Simons, thoroughly hypnotically regressing them separately as well, I think he got more information out of them. Although even Dr. Simons was kind of skeptical of the reality of what they actually experienced. But although he was skeptical, I think Betty Hill in particular felt that she had had a real experience and promoted her case for the rest of her life.
Do you think it helps in these cases? And I know that, being a paranormal investigator, that when I go out on scene to do like a preliminary investigation, it helps to have more than one person that has witnessed the stuff because it makes it more credible. In the case of Betty and Barney Hill, even though they had to do it, through hypnosis to get the stuff out, once they started doing that, the stories were similar.
Yeah, I think that's another factor in that a lot of abduction cases just involve one person. With the Betty and Barney Hill case, obviously there were two people, so it would have been harder for them to have kind of made up the story. But with them being a married couple, and with them being hypnotically regressed something like 2 or 3 years after the event, there'd been a lot of time for them to actually talk about it, and perhaps little details had rubbed off onto each other. So in a way, separating them wasn't quite as good a thing as you might imagine. I think also that Betty had had a lot of dreams and nightmares after her experience, and that seemed to be a factor in that. A lot of the things she dreamt about, she recorded under hypnotic regression. So whether the hypnotic regression was actually taking her just to her own fantasies and dreams, or to what might have actually happened, is another complex factor. And I think that's the thing about abduction cases. So you have to know a bit about human psychology, really, and but you can't just say, "Oh, it was aliens." I think there's no complex situation, and I think John Keel, sort of a pioneer investigator, always said, find out what the person had for breakfast. That meant, we should look at the wider context of the person's experiences, and often you find people who have a close encounter often have had a history of UFO sightings, and often afterwards get a lot more sightings and experiences. In particular, Betty Hill, after the encounter, still saw lots of UFOs and strange beings, and I think a lot of people thought she was a bit too excited about normal things in the sky, that other people would have said, "Oh, it's just an aircraft," whereas she felt they were aliens. So, perhaps I think she was probably a bit fantasy prone, or a bit geared up to see aliens, really. But I suppose people would say, if you've had a traumatic experience and had an alien abduction, you'd act in the same way.
Absolutely. But what I find so interesting about their story is that he was a no nonsense kind of guy. I mean, he's not just gonna, like you say, he's not the kind of guy that's gonna make up these kind of stories. I mean, he thought really logically about everything in his life.
Yeah, I think Bernie was the one who didn't want to talk about it, basically, and he wanted to put a lid on it, and it was Betty who was keen to get the story out. And I think the thing with Barney is he had a lot of other health issues and things. So that's the reason why they had hypnotic regression, was to kind of reduce the stress in his life that he was experiencing. And I think people have listened to the hypnotic regression sessions, because they were tape recorded, say, they both genuinely sound very traumatized by what they're recalling. So I don't think they ever made up the story or it was a hoax. I think they both genuinely had traumatic feelings and experiences related to whatever occurred on about 1961. Sorry.
It's so hard nowadays because back then, I mean, like you say, it would take a lot for them to create that magnetism thing that was on the car, when they were testing for that. And today it makes it a little harder because our technology is so vast right now that people can fake this stuff and you don't and you don't realize it. So it has made the job of the UFO, any investigator, harder to go out and investigate these things.
Yeah. I think also it's interesting that with the Betty and Barney Hill case, they record being stopped in the road by a flying saucer that was blocking the road, and they were kind of carried on board, whereas the kind of cases Bud Hopkins has investigated, people have been beamed up from their beds, and a lot of those sort of cases, can be explained by things like sleep paralysis. But whereas Betty and Barney Hill, they certainly didn't suffer sleep paralysis because they were driving down a road in the middle of the night. So, they would have had an accident if anything like that had happened. But we still don't really know what happened. The missing time period of about 2 hours, were they really taken on board, or did they just get lost on the back roads, and for 2 hours of missing time wasn't actually missing at all? Well, that's an interesting thing, because it was only, I think, a few weeks afterwards that somebody suggested they had missing time. So I don't think they really knew there was that much missing time until later. But, that's become a theme of all abduction cases now, especially those of, say, Bud Hopkins. And so, the framework of their abduction was completely different from a lot of the other ones. I suppose the nearest would be the Travis Walton one, in that he was kind of zapped up into a flying saucer, witnessed by his logging mates a few years later. But theirs didn't involve anything like being zapped up into a craft and suddenly appearing on an operating table. But like the later cases, it does involve the aliens medically examining them and being fascinated by Barney's false teeth. And Betty seems to think, she had a needle in her stomach, and she seems to think it was some kind of pregnancy test. But again, Barney felt more like a victim of the aliens sort of investigating him, which a lot of people seem to feel. Whereas Betty felt more on equal terms with the aliens. She spoke to one of the ones she thought was a leader, who showed her the famous star map on the wall, and she even tried taking a book from the flying saucer to prove that it was something real, but we wouldn't let her take it with her. So in a way, the experience reflects quite a lot of her own personalities. Barney felt threatened and, being more of a lab animal, whereas Betty seemed more confident and on equal terms with them. So, so I think you have to bear that in mind when people talk about abduction experiences, because, some people think, they've really improved their lives and they're an important element to improving their lives, whereas other people regard them as demonic and, frightening elements of their life. I think like Willie Strober's experiences are very much on the horror spectrum of things, which is surprising considering he's a horror book writer. So, so perhaps the type of aliens you get are the type of aliens that you fear the most,
Right.
or want the most.
Do you think there's multiple that there's multiple races of aliens out there? That it's not just the Greys?
Well, there's different types of aliens. Did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with that in Barney Hill, the aliens they saw were kind of shortish humanoid, more like normal humans, but with slightly different eyes and heads, really. But generally, they weren't too different from our own physique. Whereas over time, we've got the greys, and there again, it's something that they came along more in the 80s and 90s. And I think a big influence of that was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where it has a spindly little aliens at the end of the film. And it seems to be a running theme that the aliens have become more like these spindly grey creatures who are not very friendly, or some people even think they're almost like automatons or something, not really, or it might be a combination of technology and biology. Whereas I think Betty and Barney Hill's aliens seemed a bit more like aliens out of a science fiction film of that period, really. And aliens do go through different fashions as well. We get robots and giant ones and even really small aliens. And also different countries have different types of aliens. I think the South Americans tend to have more aggressive aliens. There's a lot of old stories of Brazilian witnesses seeing a UFO land and then actually being in a fist fight with an alien, whereas you don't get that in North America or even Europe. And I think some people say in the UK, you're more likely to have a kind of more Nordic aliens in any abduction cases. But having said that, in Britain, we haven't really had that many famous cases. There's Alan Godfrey, who was a policeman who, like Betty and Barney Hill, came across a UFO in the middle of a road, and he, under hypnotic regression, found he was being sort of looked at by aliens. I think some of them had sort of dog-like heads and were quite frightening. But I think that's another factor with hypnotic regression. Sometimes, people are very traumatized, so it's hard to get a very clear picture of what really went on. And I think if you listen to some of Bud Hopkins's tapes, he has to sort of coax people and calm them down, and it can take a very long time to get any real information out of people. And you don't really know whether, by doing that kind of probing, you're actually creating the story rather than uncovering it. So I think the whole matter of alien abductions needs, I think it needs, very qualified and professional people to investigate them, really. And, that's a very, difficult thing to do, because we only have to look at the UAP cases and how difficult it is just to pin down lights in the sky. So to actually do a thorough sort of alien abduction investigation could be very beyond the resources of most UFO groups, really,
Right.
to to do it justice.
How long did it take you to do the research for your book?
I think I did it over quite a long period of time, like 2 or 3 years, really, and it's got a foreword by Peter Rogerson, who died before the book came out, and he wrote for something called Magonia magazine, which I also wrote for, and it was edited by John Rimmer, and it was a magazine that started in the 1960s, but in the 1970s it was called the Merseyside UFO Bulletin, before it became Magonia, and basically it was a lot of it was inspired by John Keel and his talk about extraterrestrials. So we looked at cases in terms of looking at cases where there were more psychological elements in them, I suppose. And John Keel had pointed out that a lot of abductions or encounters were very kind of ghostly and mystical, and not anything like meeting a real nuts and bolts spacecraft. And so kind of looked at I suppose what we call the Magonian view of ufology, the psychological and sociological impact of a subject and its influences. We looked at sort of the influence of films, like I said, Close Encounters, I think, did influence the subject quite a lot. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
And in the 1950s, there's a constant feedback between the films and the reports, because George Adamski's stories are almost like straight out of The Day the Earth Stood Still and movies of that period. And in fact, if you read George Adamski's books now, the spaceships are very much of that period, very clunky and mechanical. Whereas if you look at more modern day abduction accounts, they're a lot more sleeker in terms of technology. So perhaps some people would say that's because your imagination is playing with things that are already in the society. But I suppose you could also argue that if they are aliens, they could just manipulate your mind to make you, perceive things in a way that you'd be happy to perceive and expect. So there is a sort of top-down or bottom-up approach to that. So I suppose if we are genuinely aliens, it can manipulate our minds anyway. So it's very difficult for us to actually look, beyond our own human understanding.
Absolutely. I was just thinking while you were talking too, as far as encounters. I mean, you mentioned like Brazil and those places, and I know for years, even growing up and reading books about this stuff or reading magazine articles, a lot of that stuff was taking place in Brazil, and you didn't hear about a lot of it here in the U.S., where now it's kind of shifting to where you're hearing more and more about it over, like in the U.S. Is that because maybe they're more open to it over in Brazil than they were here? You think?
Yeah, it could be. I think it depends on the sort of people who are interested in the subject as well. I think in South America there was a lot of enthusiastic investigators, and we also, wrote up their reports, and we often ended up in the British Flying Saucer Review, and in American publications like APRO's Bulletin and everything. So I think there's good communication between the continents, and also there's sort of enthusiastic investigators. But I was just reading something the other day about UFO statistics, and somebody was saying the problem with a lot of the South American cases is that there's not much quality control. So,
Right.
you know,
Right.
I suppose that's a problem with looking at statistics or any group of cases from different societies.
Mhm.
Some UFO groups wouldn't touch some cases with a barge pole, whereas others will openly want to investigate and embrace that case. So I think, there is that problem about there's no particular set standards really. And, sometimes cases can escalate where somebody says they see a light in the sky, then a bit later on they see a disc, and then, start meeting entities. I
Mhm.
think sometimes exposure to investigators can sort of pollute the field. I think that Betty and Barney Hill met Walter Webb from NICAP early on, and he could well have influenced them by talking about South American cases because he'd been involved in finding out about some of those cases, and he'd spoken to them about it. Plus, Betty Hill had read a book by Donald Kehoe, and I think she sort of investigated the whole subject after her
Mhm.
encounter. So that kind of pollutes the field a bit as well. But you can't really blinker witnesses from what's going on around, and I suppose it's natural, for people to read up on the subject. But I think that's a problem. It can sort of escalate, and
Mhm.
sometimes, investigators can be perhaps overzealous and then start encouraging people to have more encounters. I think that's a bit of a problem with Bud Hopkins, perhaps. I've mentioned him a few times, but I suppose he was one of the major people to put the subject into the mainstream.
Mhm.
And I think with his use of hypnotic regression and his theories about hybrid breeding programs and things like that, kind of they had a heavy influence on the subject. But
Mhm.
I suppose now there's no real evidence for it. That's a problem. I suppose you need somebody to promote a certain angle to get the attention, but whether there's the actual evidence to support it is something else. And although, like we were keen on the writers of John Keel, it was a bit like John Fuller in that they were professional journalists, so we had to make money from their writing. I
Right.
think John Keel was quite keen on cases that other sort of serious investigators might not have bothered with. But I think he kind of opened our eyes to, the possibility of things beyond the ETH, but perhaps he created other problems by saying the ultra terrestrials from other dimensions, because that's even harder to prove,
Mhm.
because if aliens can shapeshift and come through portals or turn up at window areas, they're so elusive in that sense that you're never going to pin them down, are you? Instead of trying to get the nuts and bolts flying saucers, if there are any, or if there are any in Area 51,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Well, I was thinking as you were talking too about the Mojave incident and what happened afterwards, and what they witnessed in their bedroom. With these aliens, seemingly coming through walls and stuff to take them with them.
Mm,
And it's just like you say that the after effects of these things are fascinating because it's either people have nightmares afterwards, so maybe they're still being taken or whatever, but there's also the people that physically see them come into their homes to
mm,
take them.
yeah. I think the problem with a lot of physical evidence we've had so far are things like rubble and things. There's a famous Murray Island case at the very start of sort of UFOs in 1947, where there's people said they'd seen some flying saucers above a boat.
Mm-hmm.
This sort of slag was dropped from a flying saucer, one of the flying saucers, and it killed their dog and damaged their boat. And I think Kenneth Arnold actually was paid by Raymond Palmer to investigate the story. And really, I think it was a kind of made up story, but the United States Air Force, I think, were involved in it in trying to find out something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 Air Force people did collect some of this rubble or whatever it was that fell from a flying saucer, but they died in an air crash coming back to base. So it had kind of fairly tragic consequences. But I think that was a problem with any kind of UFO evidence, particularly in the early days. People turned up with all sorts of things and said they saw, people were hoaxing each other and things like that. And there wasn't any real, it was one of these subjects that could have easily fizzled away. And, it's surprising how many cases do involve just rocks and rubble, really.
Right.
There's a famous South American case like that, the Ubatuba case, where I think the material was eventually sent to the United States, but it's very hard when you haven't got anything really solid, or the kind of solid evidence you get seems rather un-extraterrestrial.
Right. Now, when you talk about evidence, what kind of evidence would it take to convince you that somebody was actually taken?
Well, I think the problem is I've got more skeptical over the years, and so I think it would have to be an actual, spaceship, really, or something like on the cover of a book. I think it's quite interesting though that when these Chinese balloons came over the United States and got shot down, they actually did seem like solid things, whereas most kind of UFO sightings are very insubstantial and fleeting, and aircraft never get to shoot them down or anything. And I think it would have to be a solid spacecraft, but because I don't really feel like there are such things as a solid spacecraft coming here, because the main question then is, where are they coming from? The old contactee days, you could believe that we came from Venus or Mars or elsewhere in the solar system, but now we have to put them either further back into the solar system or then beyond our solar system, and then it means we'd have to come light years away. So the type of spaceship we might have wouldn't be anything like something we invented for 1950s flying saucer movies. So so it would be hard really to find any real evidence. I think that's a problem with like the Roswell thing. We're assuming the flyings is if there is wreckage in Area 51 or all these things, people are assuming it's some sort of spacecraft. But even when you look at the original story and the kind of wreckage we were finding was like tinfoil and bits of like some wood I-beams and things, which is highly unlikely for anything to travel, anywhere beyond our own atmosphere.
Right.
I think that opens up a new can of worms really about what objects might be coming here. I suppose those who are sort of like SETI experts who search for extraterrestrial intelligence, they've always been looking for radio signals, but I think even some of them are persuaded because of an interest in new apps. They've been persuaded perhaps to look a bit more closer to home,
Mm-hmm.
and we do. There are a lot of asteroids and meteorites and meteors swanning about in the solar system. So one theory might be that intelligent species would send out spacecraft, remote controlled spacecraft
Mm-hmm.
to other solar systems. So, hidden amongst our own solar system, there could be craft or evidence of craft have passed by. But, that again is, speculation really,
Mm-hmm.
because you could say, it's a bit like searching the beach for just finding that little grain of sand. And that's a problem with looking for radio signals or actual craft. So I think it's I think for your subject, you've got to be patient really, and just, take what you can from a subject. I just find it fascinating because of the different stories that come along and the new developments like disclosure
Mm-hmm.
being something that's been on the ball for a long time. And but I'm skeptical it will actually get anywhere. But it's just interesting to see what might come up. And I think people are becoming a bit more open and minded about the subject. And, even if people don't believe in it, I think more skeptics who can investigate the subject actually add something to it. And it's become more of a sort of academic pursuit as well. There are quite a
Mm-hmm.
lot of academic studies on abductions and witness um, testimony and things like that. So I think it's a fascinating area, really, and even things like sleep paralysis. Um, if it's no more than that, it's still
Mm-hmm.
a subject that was never thought about or studied before alien abductions came along. So I think there are lots of elements of human psychology that could be studied because of the subject and what people believe. So that's just one area really, and there's lots of other areas really where,
Mm-hmm.
so, from looking at outer space to the inner mind really, and that's what's so intriguing about the subject really, that there are so many different facets to it, and there's lots of different characters. And
Mm-hmm.
I suppose living in the UK, we're kind of like spectators to what's going on in the United States, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously the whole subject seems to be on the boil over there rather than in Europe or anywhere else. So I think it's one of those things though, nobody will be satisfied with the answers, and that's why it's continued to be a mystery.
Mm-hmm. When you look at the cases that you covered in your book, I know we talked about Barney and Biddy Hill and a little bit about Willie Stryber and another case. Which one really stands out to you as being the most credible?
Um, I think the Betty and Barney Hill case
Mm-hmm.
is probably the most credible and pivotal, but most frustrating as well. And I think the problem with a lot of other cases are, they tend to be more like sleep paralysis and
Right.
not have much, physical evidence. And I think with the Betty and Barney Hill case, because the case was followed for so long and there's been quite a lot of writing and study
Mm-hmm.
and talk about it, I think you can look at it from lots of different angles, really, and either use it just to say, I think that's a problem. You can't just dismiss these things as just, oh, well, it's somebody's imagination or something, because you think, well, even if it is somebody's imagination, it's had a powerful impact on our society and popular culture. Their case was made into a film, UFO
Right.
incident,
Right.
and it had a strong influence on other people. I'm sure it probably influenced, people like Spielberg and other directors, and and also it had a quite powerful influence on our subject itself. I think it probably set off the whole thing about alien greys and abductions anyway. And I think also for quite credible witnesses as well. They're not, well, Betty might have been a fantasist afterwards, but she was very persuasive and eloquent. And I think that's another element of the case. She was able to talk about it and be quite influential in terms of what she told people and how it became a book and a film. And,
Right.
and I think that's why I kind of centre on that case. But it's kind of like, I think somebody else has just written a book about it, about the case as well, in terms of the kind of politics of the period. They were very much community spirited people, were involved in, black rights and social issues, and Betty was a social worker. So they were very much in the flux of things going on in the wider political context as well. So I think that's something else about the case, that it has all those other elements, whereas a lot of other cases, although can be quite fascinating. Whitley Strieber's story has obviously got lots of different chapters, I suppose, but a lot of the cases it's kind of are either one-off instances or not that convincing, really. Or some people just do it for like short term, and then we go on to something else. So,
Do you think now, as opposed to back when this happened with Betty and Barney Hill, do you think now people are more open to coming out and talking about this stuff?
Yes, I think certainly people are now. I think it's easy for people to laugh at anyone who said they saw UFOs. And, in the 1950s, you had, the little green men and lots of cartoons. And often UFO witnesses were depicted as being drunks or seeing something, when they've been leaving the pub. And, I think the latest things with UAPs and the release of the videos from the US Navy aircraft and everything has sort of put it on the agenda. But and I don't think people are laughing so much. But I think the problem now is that people are kind of over-egging it and zealous about things in Area 51. And there's lots of whistleblowers who are coming out repeating stories that have been outed as hoaxes and not credible. So I think the problem is, even for people being influential in political circles in America, have repeated a lot of very dodgy stories. I looked at something not long ago, was revealed that there was a top secret report on, physiological effects of flying saucers, but it was mainly a hypothetical thing about the influence of things on human body by something like, a flying saucer. But all the cases it lists, a lot of them aren't really credible, and you could debate the quality of the data the hypothesis is based on. So, because a lot of cases like the Cash Landrum case was, they said were affected by radiation from a flying saucer, but if he had been affected by that level of radiation, it would have killed them rather than just cause a hair to drop out. So.
Right.
But there again, it's a debatable case, and I think whatever case you bring up, somebody will come and support it. But I think the problem is at the moment trying to get disclosure. But what are people trying to disclose? Like if there's nothing in Area 51, how can you prove it? You
Right.
have to, if the Pentagon says there's nothing in Area 51, well, people just say, well, that's what we'd tell you. So closing secrets out of that sort of scenarios virtually impossible. I think whatever political pressures put on things, nobody's going to be really satisfied. Really, in fact, I thought it would be a good idea for a plot for a film where the government's so pressurized to come up with UFO evidence that we actually build a flying saucer and bring it, and then have it on display in Area 51, and then satisfy people's curiosity. Because I think that's another thing, because the Freedom of Information Act in America, and then different releases elsewhere in the world, people put a lot of pressure on government to release all the documentation.
Right.
And all the documents come out, it's all a load of bureaucratic rubbish, really, and that there's a lot of material there, but it's not very thoroughly investigated. So people then spent years getting the governments to open up all their files just to find that their information isn't much better than, say, the stuff in NICAP files or the British UFO Research Association files. So I think that's, that was a kind of major disappointment of this of the last few decades. Like people like David Clarke in Britain helped release all the British files and made them available in the Public Records Office. So now everyone can read all the Ministry of Defence files, but I'm not sure if anybody's actually bothered, because it's not much more than what you get in flying saucer magazines of the period, really. That's either because the government wasn't that interested, or there's been different levels of investigation where, some cases that might have been really enigmatic or mysterious were probably investigated at a different level altogether and filed away. But I think 99% of the time, the government had other things to do, really, and it took a lot of its stance on the subject from America, really. So whatever American security forces like the CIA and everything thought about flying saucers, we just echoed then, because thought, well, they know best, sort of.
Right.
And I suppose one of the most famous cases in Britain, the Rendlesham Forest case,
Yes.
was actually experienced by US servicemen. So even our best case is something that was sort of experienced on almost American territory in Britain. So that's another quite complex case, really, probably as complex as the Betty and Barney Hill case.
Mm-hmm.
But then lots of allegations of a landed flying saucer and things like that, and stories of binary code and all that sort of thing, but no solid evidence, really. And so, there's an old load of people saying for just mistaking a lighthouse and larking about, right through to people say, we had some sort of contact with an extraterrestrial craft. So I suppose it's down to your own inclinations, really, as much as any evidence. And evidence is quite in short supply, really, with this subject.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think they're ever going to come clean? That the government has more in their possession than they let on. Like you talk about, that there's very little evidence. So do you think that, because I mean, there's always rumors of the agreement that the government made and all this with the aliens. So do you think that they've got more stuff from these aliens than they let on?
I don't know really, because I think a major problem was a book called I forget the name. The Mirage Man by Mark Pilkington, and that talks about how the government has used the subject to cover up other things. And that's another reason why a lot of cases perhaps have got ignored or put away in secret archives, is because secret aircraft were experimented with. A lot of them were probably United States projects. Like with Roswell, we say it could have been a sky-up balloon or something like that.
Right.
Why nobody was able to identify the wreckage, because it was a top secret project and we wanted to quickly, bury it. And I suppose that's quite believable. And I think the CIA has admitted that it covered up cases by using UFOs as a front, because I think at one time journalists, if they did come across a UFO stories, would probably ignore it, and think it's a load of rubbish. Whereas at least now I think people would do a lot more digging. But and also, you can't rule out there might have been foreign craft being flown over enemy territory,
Right.
either in Europe or the United States. And also, like in Sweden, there's all these ghost rockets shortly after the Second World War. And there again, was it a case of people seeing Soviets experimenting with rockets and sending them over Sweden, or is it a case of people recovering from the war and interpreting meteors and things like that as ghost rockets? And there again, no solid evidence was found for them, whereas during the war, solid evidence was found for the V1 and V2 weapons. And I think there is a really good case where people said they saw a ghost rocket land in a lake. It's been virtually impossible to find it in the lake. So it's fair again. It's the subject's always sort of like there's always evidence, but it's always a bit out of reach, really, either because of physical factors, like it's in the ocean or a lake, or somewhere really remote, or it's buried in files, for other reasons, not just because of any alien craft, really. I think I think in a way people use disclosure as a big umbrella term without really defining what it means, because obviously, particularly in the United States, there's so many different departments of defense and secret, FBI, CIA, DOA, and all those sorts of things. Opening all their files, there's so many other organisations you might not even know about. So I think, I think that's a frustrating thing, and it's quite interesting. Somebody like Leonard Stringfield years ago collected, probably easily 100 cases of whistleblowers saying they'd seen alien bodies or spacecraft recovered, but nearly all of them were anonymous sources, and they all kind of promised more information and all kind of disappeared in the end. And I suppose most people have probably, forgotten a lot about his research anyway. But he was digging up, numerous stories of alien craft recoveries, most of which are probably long forgotten now. And I think that's a problem with this new phase of UAPs. People are digging up old stories that never got anywhere in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just that I've been interested in the subject so long that you kind of get a bit cynical about these things. But I think if I was a newcomer to the subject, I think, oh great, there's all these sort of videos by jet pilots and sightings of things by the Navy and things being detected. But we've kind of been there before, really, with pilots saying they'd seen things and everything, and it never really got down to anything substantial, And I think with the past, say in the 50s, you got far more cases involving radar, but I think
Mm-hmm.
as radar technology has got better, you have less of these sort of radar glitches and
Right.
things.
Right. Right.
Because a lot of it could be like weather anomalies and things like that, which modern systems would filter. But having said that, when with people like NASA and that being involved with studying the subject, they've realised the kind of sensors and detectors that need to be reconfigured to look for fast-moving, fleeting objects in the atmosphere. And
Mm-hmm.
so far we've only had kind of fleeting glimpses of things by technology that wasn't built to look for UFOs. And I think there's quite a few organizations now are beginning to kind of sell UFO detection kits with cameras and computer um, links and everything. So that I think if we want to create kind of networks where if a UFO is detected, it can be kind of quickly analyzed by computer and perhaps triangulated by um, other sensors elsewhere. But I think the problem is when you look at our planet, how difficult it is to even cover just a small area really with that kind of detection equipment. And there again, what are we looking for? Is it just some really exotic meteorological phenomenon, like
Mm-hmm.
ball lightning or
Right.
something else entirely, or you could detect some exotic plasma or something, but that doesn't mean to say something else is going on in the sky as well. So, you know,
Absolutely. So what's next for you?
what for my own at the moment, I had a book out called UFO Investigations Manual,
Mm-hmm.
which was by Haynes, which normally publishes like car maintenance manuals, but they brought that book out about 10 years ago now. And basically, it was a kind of overview of a subject, the kind of beginnings of ufology, the history of a subject, and the predominant kind of ways of looking at the subject and investigations and theories.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's kind of gone out of print. So now with 10 years later, so much has happened with the subject. I'm tempted to kind of add a few chapters to it
Mm-hmm.
and sort of bring it out again as a sort of almost like a completely revised look at the subject because so many things have changed. But I also do a monthly column for 40M Times where I tend to write about the kind of latest things in ufology and or different resources as well, because That's another thing with the subject, with it, with us having the internet now and digital technology.
Mm-hmm.
Literally hundreds of magazines are being digitized in Sweden by AFU. They're collecting everybody's old archives and everything, and they're putting everything online. So I think, and also people are beginning to use AI to analyze all the data as well. So there's lots of new openings in the subject for studying what we already have, because I think a lot of these new studies are looking at collecting new material. I'm a
Right.
bit reluctant to look at the past, but as kind of amateur observers, I think it's worth us being aware of what's in the past as well, because otherwise you're just repeating the same mistakes
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing what's gone before. Really, I think that is another trouble with the current phase, that quite a few other people involved seem to have little or no interest in the past, or seem to be a bit ignorant of some of the older cases that probably
Right.
put bearing on the subject. But like I say, really, there's so many facets to the subject that sometimes it's good to just look at one specific area and,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and just concentrate on that. And that's kind of what I did with the Betty and Barney Hill case, because I thought, that's a good sort of focal point to kind of spin out other ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so there's always plenty going on.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it,
Yeah, thank you very much.
and we'll
Enjoyed
try
it.
to get you back on a later date to talk more about this.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, bye.
Okay. How can
Bye.
people find you?
I'm on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page, UFO Investigations Manual, and I also there's a website called the Pelicanist blog, and
Mm-hmm.
that has a lot of archives about Magonia magazine and latest book reviews. And I every month or so I contribute a few UFO book reviews as well. So if you, if anyone looks up for Pelicanist blog, that's a handy
Okay.
way of looking at things.
Fair enough. All right. You have a good rest of your evening, sir.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night. Have a
Bye.
great one. Bye. Wow, that was terrific. Learned so much. Sorry about that. My allergies are really bad, so I'm having to like open and close my eyes a lot. It really bites. I hate when it gets this bad. But it is hot here, I'll tell you for sure. Anyway, tomorrow we're back at our usual time, and we're going to kind of be on the same subject a little bit here. Mary A. Joyce is with us. And I've been trying to get her on for a long time, and she has I'm not going to say conspiracy theories, but she's had connections at what she calls connections at NASA and things for some different stories. And one of the most intriguing ones that I find is that the NASA astronauts on the space shuttle had met with alien beings, and they caught it on live on film, and then NASA supposedly hid the video of that. So we're going to be talking with her about stuff like that tomorrow. So that'll be our usual time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. All right. Okay. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. We're just trying to get the word out about our show. If you're watching today and you like the show, and there's other people in your house or wherever, say, hey, come here, there's this cool show that I like watching. It's a little show, but it's got good stuff. Please do that, because we are just trying to get the word out. And for every person that talks to 3 or 4 people about the show, it spreads the word, and then those people come watch the show, and then they spread the word, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming today, and I will see you guys tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. I'll leave you with his information, and have a great day. Websites, talkingpics.co.uk. So it's talkingpix.co.uk, and facebook.com. Okay. Captured by Aliens is one of the books, and The Alien Deception is another book that he's got out. UFO, and UFOs the first World War. And of course, you can get those at Amazon. Okay, guys, I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Hopefully, my allergies are going to be a lot better. But I really appreciate him coming on. It's a fascinating topic. I'm totally fascinated about this stuff. So I really enjoyed today's show, and I hope you did too. All right. That being said, have a great rest of your day or evening or whatever you're doing, and I'll see you tomorrow.